So I was gonna do like a choreographed dance routine to Bye to start off today's video, but the Backstreet Boys wouldn't let me use the song. Weird, right? I wonder how many comments I'm going to get people yelling at me saying, like, it's in sync, you fool. I know, you were getting trolled. Hello, folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU, here for another Legacy video, and today we are going to be playing with a mono-green Eldrazi deck list. And I want to use this deck tech as a time to do a little bit of a theory dump about the deck list. So let's go to MTG Top 8 for a minute. If we go here and we look at about the last 2 weeks worth of data, we can see Eldrazi aggro sitting at about 13%, meaning that it's more popular than something like Grixis Delver, but less popular than something like the blue-black Reanimator, Riskaminator, whatever you want to call it list. And so this deck is probably in position number 2 as far as the metagame goes. But if you go through and you flip through this deck lists, one of the things that you're going to find is that there's no fucking established way to build this deck. People are absolutely in disagreement about what this deck should look like, but it is unquestionably clear that the deck is very, very powerful. And so, despite the fact that people don't agree on whether the deck should be multicolored, whether or not you should be playing Eldrazi Linebreaker, how many big things you need, should you be playing Gaia's Cradle, and the list of questions goes on and on and on. Sometimes you have Chalice, sometimes you have Vexing Bauble, sometimes you have Mox Diamond. The deck is just good as long as you are playing the core of the deck list. See the most recent Eternal Glory episode for more details, if you want like a nuanced description of like what's going on with the Eldrazi and a long breakdown of it. So Michael has asked me to play mono green Eldrazi today, and this is the final deck list that we're going to play. I'm going to kind of talk about this list, and then I'm going to talk about the changes I made from Michael's original list. The list needed a little bit of polish, and I'm going to talk about why. Michael's biggest tech here is playing the Vexing Baubles in the main deck. And yes, those can very occasionally get in the way of your Lotus Petals, but the ability to have 8 things which make your Eldrazi uncounterable when they already have such a high impact on the beginning of the game is very, very strong. And the primary changes that I have made to this deck list is inserting a playset of Wastegate Battlemage into the main deck and adding 2 Devourer of Destinies to the main deck. And I'm going to talk about what I took out, because Michael admittedly had some pet cards. So one of the first things that I did was cut the 2 copies of Breaker of Creation that were in the initial deck list. Michael's rationale for playing this was, I want to offset the life loss from Ancient Tomb. And that is a valid line of thinking. And I don't want to criticize that line of thinking. But I want you to think about the current Legacy format. How much life is this going to gain? You know, in the average game, when you cast this, how much life are you gaining? 3, 4 life most of the time, you know, kind of something like that. You know, this can be a turn 4 or turn 5 play pretty easily in a deck like this one. So you can offset an Ancient Tomb activation or 2 with this pretty easily. And my question to you is, does that matter? And I believe the answer is no. When I think about damage increments in this current format, a lot of times you are taking damage in chunks that kill you in 3 or 4 turns. Think your Murktide Regents, your Psychic Frogs when someone goes all in on them, your opposing Eldrazi, especially with Eldrazi Linebreaker getting the mix in. I don't think casting this at 8 mana and gaining a little bit of life matters when that life might not even offset a single combat step from your opponent. Now, will this sometimes change the clock and increase the clock? We got a cat by 1 turn. Yes, absolutely. But is this worth playing over the other things that exist in the deck? And I think very strongly the answer is no. So let's do a quick compare and contrast. Michael's original build only had 2 copies of Devourer of Destiny. And my question is, which one of these cards gains you more life in the average game? And I think it's this one, and I think it's not close. You cast this, you exile a Murktide Regent. Maybe that's 6 life this turn and 6 life the following turn on a cast trigger. That's pretty hot. And this also is fixing for the beginning of the game. So while I understand the rationale that led to that decision, I think when this goes and exiles your opposing Psychic Frog, your opposing Murktide Regent, if you're living in Magical Christmas Land, you snag an Atraxa or a Grizzlebrand or whatever, this does a lot of work. Now, this one will be worse in the Eldrazi mirror. Just full disclosure there. The life gain is maybe more relevant in that one. But this also will frequently come down a turn earlier and has slightly higher toughness for when that matters in opposing creature mirrors. And the second pet card that was in the deck was Weatherlight Completed. And this one was disclosed as a pet card. I didn't have to keep it in the deck list. So let's take a look at this. This is a 2-mana vehicle, and you'll notice that there is not a crew ability on this. That does not exist here. This is important. So, 5/5 flyer for 2 mana. Sounds good on paper, but it is only a creature as long as it has 4 or more Phyresis counters on it. Then you can start attacking with it. Whenever a creature you control dies, put a Phyresis counter on this, and then draw a card if it has 7 or more counters on it. If it doesn't, you scry 1. So I think this card is very, very much a trap in Legacy, specifically within the context of the deck. And the reason that I think this is, when do you cast this card? And this is the problem. Unless your hand is turn 1 Ancient Tomb and Weatherlight Completed, you are probably never going to realistically cast this card in a game. Because once you hit that second land drop, it is probably better for you to cast something like a Glaring Fleshraker. And while this can absolutely do some disgusting things, if you, have a giant game-ending Kozilek's command, you cast that for 7, you go, you sack a bunch of things, you draw some cards, whatever. Aren't you probably going to win the game anyway if you have a Kozilek's command for that large of a number and you get that degree of selection or that many chump blockers or that much more mana back, right? So I think this is one of those things that it sounds fun to do, but when you play this in practice, this is the floor of this card is pay 2 mana, do nothing. That's the literal floor of this card. If you don't have creatures dying because your creatures are getting exiled by, your Leyline Binding, Swords to Plowshares, this does nothing. It is kind of cool with Eldrazi spawn tokens, turning them into things that scry in addition to that. But I do not think the juice is worth the squeeze here. So let's go back to the deck list one more time. So taking out some of Michael's cards, I have inserted in some copies of Wastegate Battlemage. I think between this and Devourer of Destiny, you have Game 1 removal covered. The Wastegate Battlemage is not always exciting, but the ability to, nuke an opposing Urza's Saga or just out-tempo your opponents because you can bounce their creatures uncounterably or snag them with exile triggers later on. I'm going to honor a few things from the original deck list that I don't think are optimal. I don't think you need 10 mana Eldrazi in this deck list. I think you can just kill your opponent. I don't think you need this as a silver bullet to tutor off of Eye of Ugin, but it's certainly an interesting card. And I'm going to honor Null Elemental Blast. We will try that out. This is something that I am not excited about. It is an efficient removal spell for a Psychic Frog specifically, and can answer some stuff that exists in the format. But when I think of a lot of critical things in the format, they are monocolored things that are in multicolored deck. Brainstorm, Ponder, Swords to Plowshares, Leyline Binding, Reanimate, Troll of Khazad-dûm, Murktide Regent. I think Null Elemental Blast is a reasonable card that just ends up missing a lot of stuff. It's cool. We'll see whether or not it's good. And if you'll humor me for a second, I'm going to do my Moxfield ad read now rather than later in the video because I think this is relevant. So when I was building this deck list, I forgot the name of one of the cards that was originally in the deck list. And when I went to shoot this deck tech, I was like, oh man, what was the name of that 8-mana Eldrazi that I thought was unplayable? And Moxfield has a recent history tab. So if you want to see what you have recently taken in and out, you have the ability to adjust that. And if you want to see the full history, around 10 changes at a time, you can flip through what has happened to your deck list. And I just think this is a useful tool for those deck builders out there who are like, oh man, what was in here before? So yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and battle, folks. If you need some Eldrazi cards, you should probably own them if you have a pretty sizable legacy collection and you want to be able to build everything. Please consider checking out my sponsor, TOAMagic.com. Tales of Adventure always gives you free shipping on all their online orders, and promo code ThrabenU will save you a little bit on your order as well on top of that. Let's battle. All right, my opening hand is good. There will just be some question as to how I play it out. Well, now I don't really need to talk about it. We could just play Glaring Fleshraker, because we know that Vexing Bauble isn't like super relevant here. And we know that we don't have to worry about Cavern of Souls. I am going to deal a decent amount of damage very quickly. That's a good play for my opponent. I view the Kozilek's command as pretty easily the best card in my hand here. My opponent agrees. So they have stalled the board here, which is fantastic for them. You can go on Eldrazi. So we're going to do a decent amount of damage directly with our Fleshraker here. We're going to have a lot of triggers this turn. Now, if I want, I can sacrifice one of these to immediately deal 1 direct damage and replace this card. I think that's fine. That, like, sits this card in play, and then I can sacrifice it on my next turn to take the redraw. I don't think I need to sacrifice it immediately and expose whatever card that I draw here to another opposing Thought-Knot Seer. This is real bad. So this is kicked, exiling my temple, and then my opponent can grab a wasteland to grab my Cavern of Souls. That's pretty rough. What did we talk about? What did we talk about in the deck tech? I will take this redraw now. That's awkward. It's probably my best play. I think I'm going to attempt to cut my opponent off of colored mana specifically and pass the turn. I think I just never beat something like an Eldrazi Linebreaker coming down. The opponent wants to offer this trade that I can't double block the Thought-Knot Seer. I think I'll accept. It makes it easier for me to top deck a threat and play one. And it does ping my opponent here. Well, there goes that uncastable Ulamug. Sure. Alright, well, we'll just pass the turn here. I am under a large amount of pressure. As far as mid-rangey stuff, what can I draw into? I want to make sure I have at least 4 mana available. I always do. I think I will just take blocks, though. 6 matters if I top deck a Sowing Mycospawn. Maybe I can't block with both of these. I want 1, 2, 3, and 4 with green. Yeah, one block. But another one? Chalice of the Void. That hits 3 cards in my deck. I guess that's fine. Name Eldrazi. Never blocking with this, so I'll just bash in. Yeah, I think my opponent's Thought-Knot Seer, their first Thought-Knot Seer taking my Kozilek's command was very good, and then the Sowing Mycospawn as follow-up just kind of ended the game. My top decks aren't doing me any wonders here either. My window to use Ancient Tomb is closing. I just haven't top decked anything to give me follow-ups here. So I've kept my opponent off colorless mana, or sorry, off colored mana, but that apparently is not mattering. So I think I'm going to ignore the Chalice, cast with Blue Kicker. Ow. We're going to do this. and bounce a Thought-Knot Seer in an attempt to draw another card, I think. This is going to give me some spawn tokens. We have drawn another land. Rough. Name Eldrazi and pass. Maybe I can still draw a Kozilek's command and win. I won't be able to tap this. Do it for X equals 2. That'll be worth 3 direct damage. Always this block. I could double block here and kill Thought-Knot Seer, draw a card. Can I engineer a win if I draw Kozilek's command? X equals 2. 3 direct damage. My opponent goes to 4. I won't have colored mana for kicking. I draw like Kozilek's command into Kozilek's command. Alright, let's try this. But we are trying to not top deck that many lands. Unseed. So I would like to get rid of these Vexing Baubles. They don't do anything. That can get me 2 Dismembers. Not relevant. Not relevant. Not particularly good. Play an additional land and super reluctantly keep 1 Vexing Bauble in the deck. I could play a Disruptor Flute for an opposing Eye of Ugin. That's maybe better than Vexing Bauble. So this is turn 3 Sowing Mycospawn. This is a little awkward. These are good at 4 mana in this specific matchup. I still probably keep it. I could consider playing one of these as just a turn 1 attacker. I think that's fine. I don't think it's exciting. I think it's just fine. Ooh, that's not great for me. Sure. Alright. Okay. Opponent just playing those out now. Goes on Eldrazi. I bash in for 2. Yeah, losing that land sucks. That's the downside of playing out Wastecape Battle Mage early. I'll hold this Ancient Tomb in play until I can use it to cast Sowing Mycospawn. Cavern on Eldrazi again, I think just past the turn. My issue here is that if my opponent has a soul land, they can kind of be the first one to play something large and meaningful. Sure. I imagine that I probably lose the Sowing Mycospawn here. Could lose the Kozilek's command. I do lose the Sowing Mycospawn. Sure. It's really awkward to Wastecape this, bounce this, attack for 2, have my opponent replay that, take this Kozilek's command. I think it's what's happening. I just hate it. Alright, get out, I'll draw a card. It's basically fine as long as this draw is not a land. It's very awkward if this draw is a land. Draw is a Glaring Fleshraker. That's pretty darn good. I am happy with that. I'll continue my attacks. So hopefully we keep my opponent from doing 2 plays in the same turn. Like if my opponent... Ooh. So that's Sowing Mycospawn. That is going to wasteland my Eldrazi Temple. Oh! Opponent's setting up for the future. Kozilek's command is not particularly good. I think I want this in play now. Drop this Ancient Tomb and pass. Should I get to untap with this Kozilek's command, it's pretty good. If I'm forced to cast this now, it's relatively weak. Uh-huh. Thanks, I hate it. Yeah. I will cast this. I'm going to make a spawn and draw a card. So this gets me a couple of Glaring Fleshraker triggers. Now it gets me 1, sure. Considering that Thought-Knot Seer is about to just take the card anyway, this is fine. I will just like take that, draw that, and then Thought-Knot doesn't take anything. My opponent has the much better board though. I'm at 16 when all those triggers resolve. I'm just gonna take that hit. I want to be able to double block this and draw a card. Sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cavern on Eldrazi. Cast with Kicker. I don't need to tap Ancient Tomb for damage. With the Kicker, I will exile that Eye of Ugin. And get my own Eye of Ugin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That leaves a wasteland, though, to just answer it immediately. So I think I will just get my own wasteland. And I'm going to wasteland my opponent's wasteland. I think this game still favors my opponent, unfortunately. They have the larger creature, and they have the glaring Fleshraker that they can sit back on. Another Dismember kind of sucks if I go for a double block here. I think I awkwardly am going to do a triple block here. That way I always take out this creature. It lets my opponent take out my 2 smaller creatures or my larger creature. But I just always want this Thought-Knot dead. I don't want to get got. Wastscape Battle Mage, sure. There's a new Thought-Knot Seer, unfortunately, so we played around Dismember, got punished by new Thought-Knot Seer. Yep. If my opponent does decide to wasteland me. Negative. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Cool. Put it on Eldrazi. This does not cost me any life, so my opponent not wastelanding means that I get to keep all of my spawns. Cast trigger not relevant in this mirror. What is it? Breaker of Creation would be more relevant in this spot than Devourer of Destiny. Run it back. Do I want to attack? I don't really want to sit back and give my opponent time to draw stuff for Glaring Fleshraker, but this attack just gets rid of an Eldrazi spawn token, so I think I'm chilling. Maybe next turn, when I can attack with 2 at the same time, the attacks are more attractive. Oh wow, that's very good here. Because my opponent was low on fuel. So this now pings me for 2 and draws some cards. This is going to generate spawns, meaning that these aren't the best attackers here. Yep. So I'm at 4. This is late. I mean, I cast it. It's good. I think I'd Plague this land now. Yeah, these attacks just let these through. Then there are 4 attackers to my 4 blockers. No. I will hold back, hoping to top deck something like a Kozilek's Command next turn. That is a Sowing Mycospawn. That gets an Eye of Ugin, which can be good here. I mean, there's other things other than Eye of Ugin it can get. Just Eldrazi Temple. Oh, does that mean my opponent has another castable card and I just die right now? Negative. No covered wastes. I am dead to any spell. Play land for some weird Kozilek's Command nonsense past turn. Yep, that'll do. That is 2 direct damage. We are dead. GG's. Alright, I've kept my opening hand here. We have a Devourer of Destiny to start things off. So we're going to get a little selection on our first turn. I have turn 2 Glaring Fleshraker. And turn 3 will probably be really good. Are we dead? Are we going to die? Maybe not immediately. Alright, Devourer of Destiny trigger. Wasteland's real good here. Lotus Petal to Glaring Fleshraker on turn 1 sounds good. Yeah. So, cast. There's our Glaring Fleshraker. You can follow that up with Kozilek's Command to try to set up some gross things. Alright, here we go. It's Dark Ritual time, so we're like Stormin' or Doomsdayin' or something. No, it's the One Ring. Sure. That's protection from everything. I guess if I just cast a Kozilek's Command on my opponent's turn, that's not so bad. But I think I'll just make my Kozilek's Command scarier for the following turn. So we've got a whole bunch of triggers to just yield to. These are not doing any damage here. But I am making this so that a Kozilek's Command can just be absolutely massive. Hit for 5 directly, plus what? Using this as the starting 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 direct damage beyond that. So we've got some stuff going for us. And I can hold this up, so if my opponent casts a Doomsday, I can just kill them with a draw trigger on the stack. And Doomsday is what I am assuming my opponent is playing, by the way. There's a fetch land to clear that Brainstorm. but they are not clearing it. Well, 5 puts my opponent to 14. Yeah, we'll do that damage. I think I Wasteland. I think everything that sets my opponent back on mana is still good despite this. And then I think I hold up Kozilek's command rather than cast it immediately. And I want to be able to cast that after a Doomsday. Take your damage, 11. White mana, sure. Okay, there's the Doomsday. This also has a mode where target player draws a card, which is interesting. So, how do I play this? If I let this draw trigger resolve, my opponent could have blue cards in this pile which protect them. I think I'm going to fire off now. I think I'll do both of these targeting me. So, cast on always happens. First damage. Okay, it's resolving. Bottom. I think the game's over. So, I would just like to be able to draw another Kozilek's command here. So, bottom. It's a Wastegate Battle Mage anyway. So, my opponent goes to 1. So now fetch lands are off, Force of Will is off. The way my opponent constructed this pile, I could not have forced them to draw a card and get the win. Unfortunate. Tightest of margins there. So Disruptor Flute is fine. Null Rod, I guess, is playable if my opponent is playing a 1-ring build. I can already exile the 1 ring with a bunch of Wastegate Battle Mages, though, so I don't know how excited I am about that specifically. This is just too slow. That becomes a Disruptor Flute for sure. The Devourer of Destinies are mid here. I think I'm going to shave 3 of those for these. All that good. This is turn 2 Sowing Mycospawn pseudo uncounterably. This is fine. So the big thing that I need to do here is remember to play this Lotus Petal prior to playing the Vexing Bauble. So, yeah. So now the artifact mana that my opponent does have will be off. The Sowing Mycospawn is worse if they just grab Flooded Strand. Or sorry, if they just have a land sitting in play, so that's unfortunate for me. So the plan will probably shift a little bit here. I'll Sowing Mycospawn, but I do it and then probably just get Ancient Tomb instead. Ancient Tomb lets me Disruptor Flute or Null Rod immediately, but then I don't have the follow-up green. Could just get Yavimaya? I guess Cavern of Souls accomplishes a similar thing with more upside. Let's just get a Cavern of Souls, name Eldrazi. I think it is very, very, very hard for my opponent to Doomsday and kill me next turn. So I think this is okay. Sure, that's fine. We've got land drop and a cantrip. And my opponent shuffles. Fantastic. Well, that's pretty good. So we'll do Eldrazi here. I'll wasteland this Tundra now. I will cast an uncounterable Sowing Mycospawn. Wasteland's good. Ancient Tomb's good. I think I'm going to go Wasteland. A good portion of the time, my opponent needs to kill me over the course of 2 turns. Woohoo. I do almost wish I had a touch more mana here, given that. The opponent's at 16. This gets to be uncounterable. And then I probably just pass the turn. 3 more, right? 3 more. I don't think I need to do this yet. That's fine. I'll respond to that, I think. I'll get my trigger. And my opponent has to decide whether or not they are fetching with Polluted Delta immediately. They are. Sure. Design to Memory has been doing some serious work. Cycle? Cycle, then play Null Rod and Wasteland? I think I am into that. Yuck. Wasteland this immediately. Send it. Some portion of the time, this does hit a Force of Will. I think I'm good with that happening. Hopefully the Sowing Mycospawn just kind of eats my opponent alive. Thought-Knot Seer is very, very good. Like, it still gets to be uncounterable. And this presents lethal next turn, while hopefully stopping my opponent from doing the thing. Alright, cool. Game on the draw is obviously harder. I don't have much as far as possible adjustments go. Like, we're already playing some things like Null Rod that are like, So this hand has turn 2 Glaring Fleshraker, turn 3 Eldrazi Repurposer, and Null Rod. Turn 4 Kozilek's command. In theory, I would love a turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer. That's about the best thing that I can do in the matchup. Is this much pressure acceptable when my opponent has already mulliganed? I'm going to hope that the answer is yes. Like, I'm pretty good against the one ring mid-range stuff if my opponent does not have a combo-based hand. We'll see how it goes. On the off chance that I rip Thought-Knot Seer next turn, I think I need to play Eldrazi Temple immediately. And a Ponder. That's almost good. Do I take a turn off to resolve that? It's awkward that I have 4 mana, but not in a way that lets me cast both of those. My highest upside play is just playing the Glaring Fleshraker and just kind of fucking going for it next turn. I think I'm going to take that line accordingly. Yeah. I'm in play. I didn't really expect that to mean anything. Like, the Swords to Plowshares type cards still trade 1-for-1 here. Oh, no immediate swords. That's a good sign. Yeah, my opponent didn't shuffle here, so that's a thing. The Kozilek's command is kind of wild. I think that is my game ender next turn. So we're going to have some triggers here. So here's where we're at when all of those triggers clear. My opponent's at 15, about to be 13. I have some minorly disruptive things that I could also do this turn, or I could just hold up Kozilek's command. I think I am going to do the minorly disruptive things. Ping my opponent. I will just play the Null Rod here. Do I at this point attack for 2? Or do I cast this as well? I think because of Bowmasters at this point, I cast this as well. Just take the guaranteed damage and not end up in an awkward situation. Alright, 11 attacks and my opponent to 9. That was a pretty good turn 3. What, I played 1, 2, 3. Oh, fuck me. Sure. That's very awkward. And I imagine very much not stock. I'll just pass the turn here with probably end of turn, make a gajillion despawns, and scry. I respond. Spawns and scry. Actually, my opponent could hardcast a Daze. Maybe I do this for 1 less. Yeah, let's do this for 4 instead of 5. Rough. Alright, so they're just going to plus Teferi and just kind of have it hang out, and it can bounce a creature that I play. That takes a lot of pressure off my opponent. Awkward. Goes on Eldrazi. Teferi is, like, very far down on my list of things that I would like to name with Disruptor Flute, but it is what I am naming given this board. Doomsday and the One Ring are both objectively much scarier, but if I put this on this, Teferi just minuses bounce it out of play, and then they cast their thing. Or activate their thing. Sure. Damn. Alright. People are apparently fucking ready for Eldrazi. Sure. I can now cycle my Vexing Bauble, which feels like a big deal, given that I have nothing in my hand that's relevant. Shit. Yep. With the Teferi in play, I can't even get cute and flip into Kozilek's command. I imagine that I just die here. Yep. There's blue. There's 2 cards in library. And this is safe because I can't cast spells. It was not the Kozilek's command. Dead. GG's. Alright, I lost the footage for this round, so we're going to try to kind of just run this one back in a reasonable time frame here. So we're going to go turbo mode. I lead on a Vexing Bauble with a pretty reasonable Glaring Fleshraker opening hand here. And my opponent starts out gambling and discards a Ravager. I don't really know exactly what they're playing. I know that they're going to be doing some sort of madness strategy, but I don't know exactly what that's going to be. And my opponent just concedes the game immediately, which doesn't help my case. So I sideboard in a way that allows me to open up on a Leyline of the Void. It's not necessarily the, strongest opener against what my opponent is actually doing, and they end up playing an Inti on their next turn. I've got kind of an interesting decision coming up here where I decide whether or not I am like sowing mycospawning or wastegate battle maging. I can get rid of the LED or the Inti there, and it is relatively unclear to me before I really know what my opponent is doing, which one of those things is going to be better. Their deck is kind of frustrating because I can't really do my normal game plan of like tempo my opponent out with wastelands and stuff. They're just playing a giant pile of mountains, which means that my deck just doesn't really function against this opponent. And my opponent ends up just kind of tempoing out my creatures very quickly. I end up seeing that there is some graveyard related stuff here, but it is not a focus of the deck list. And there's not too much going on here for the rest of this game, if memory serves. I just kind of get rolled over. Let's just like turbo speed this because I don't think the rest of the game is relevant. I get a decent Kozilek's command here. One of the issues with like figuring out how to play this is like what to do against the trample from Inti. So I end up nuking Inti, scrying into a Thought-Knot Seer, and this is something that can temporarily block this Ravager. The combat damage doesn't end up working out, and my opponent is able to go wide of what I am doing here in this game. And then we move on to game 3. My opening hand is not great. Like, Vexing Bauble can stop LED specifically and Madness in creatures, but doesn't just stop my opponent from hard casting things. So we've got Glaring Fleshraker. We are hoping to just lead into another Glaring Fleshraker and take over the game relatively quickly. Inti triggers on attack, so the turn 1 creature is able to kind of get in there just fine. And at this point, I can Kozilek's command away the Inti. I decide that I'm going to wait 1 turn, unsure whether or not that is a mistake. Again, I don't really know my opponent's deck very well. I decide that I can attack in for 2 here and that my opponent probably can't block. Basically, in the original video, I was talking about how like I know that I'm good against everything except the card Firestorm, and that Firestorm will beat me. So, obviously, my opponent exiles a Firestorm off the Inti and is able to junk both of my Glaring Fleshrakers at the same time, which pretty much leads to me dying. I get to cycle this Bauble. I have Kozilek's command for Inti, and I made a mistake here. I put away a Wastegate Battle Mage, which is a 2/2 creature, not realizing that this was lethal. I can block here and then live 1 more turn if I just end up keeping that extra creature. But I messed up, and that's on me. Generally speaking, though, I think this was a pretty unfavorable matchup. My opponent just has so many basic lands and Magus of the Moon and Firestorm. It did not feel good from my side of the battlefield. All right, round 4, hand has 1 land, automatic mulligan. This one's fine. I think I'm gonna try to throw back Ancient Tomb. Assuming I don't get wastelanded, I have Bauble into Fleshraker into Thought-Knot Seer. Based on my opponent's hyper-aggressive mulliganing here, maybe I needed Thought-Knot Seer turn 2? Or, yeah, turn 2. Hopefully I don't just die on turn 1. Cool. Well, can keep that option open, I guess. Vexing Bauble. That's kind of what I thought. So my opponent is probably playing some unfair combo deck somewhere on like the Storm, Oops, all spell sort of spectrum. So like I'm going to assume that these 8 cards are good. This specific sideboard does not have things like Mindbreak Trap, which might be good. Ordered this out every round. I think I'll continue that trend. This is probably not super relevant. It is unclear how good the battle mages are. I'm going to assume, well, artifact mana might get played out. Devourer of Destiny lets me dig deeper for hate, but I think I'm just going to cut all of those and trim something like this. This is a 3 mana play if my opponent plays out artifact mana that I can interact with. This is technically graveyard hate if that matters. Let's go down one of those, and then I can make some actual adjustments based on what I see here. Yes. Abso-fucking-lutely. This is turn 1 Fleshraker into Thought-Knot Seers for the rest of the game. And I have Leyline to start with. Assuming Leyline is relevant. Like, this could just be a Necro Dominance deck, and my opponent just goes Dark Ritual Necro, I die. Ayo, not this time. So, Lotus Petal, and then we'll go ahead and drop the Fleshraker. Alright, looking good. Alright, is this going to be something that answers my Leyline? It is a Cabal Ritual and an Undercity Informer. You've got it. That's a 2/3 that blocks this attack. Hopefully I just obliterate my opponent's hand and take whatever can get rid of the Leyline, if there is anything. Ping 1, Ping 2. Active negation, that's irrelevant for the most part. I will take the other Undercity Informer and pass. Seems like my opponent doesn't really have anything to do. This is very good. I guess I can Thoughtseize first to see which land I should wasteland. So yeah, a little damage to my opponent. And there we go. We've got a win on board. GG's. Well, assuming I don't get wastelanded, this hand is fine to good. And I get Devourer of Destiny to kind of help out with my initial selection and maybe find me land drop number 4, or 4th mana rather. Yavimaya, sure. We could be playing an Eldrazi Mirror here, in which case my opponent probably gets to play the first creature unless I find Lotus Petal. Taking another Glaring Fleshraker is fine. Taking Eldrazi Repurposer is fine. I think I'm just going to say no and look for another land or Lotus Petal, though. Yeah, this allows me to break serve if this is the mirror and be the first one to play a creature. So let's do that. You could make an argument that I'm supposed to slow down by a turn to use that land to cast, or the Lotus Petal to cast Sowing Mycospawn, though. I think that's reasonable. But I'm hoping to just be able to like remove a creature with Kozilek's command now and make some spawns. Mutated Cultist? Okay, sure. Into the north. Okay, so my opponent is doing some nonsense. This is where we want the Wastegate Battle Mage to just nuke that. This can just get rid of a Merit Lage token, though. So I guess that's good. This is just going to be Cavernous Souls on Eldrazi. Attack and pass. The Sowing Mycospawn in my hand is quite good. Opponent will probably walk directly into Kozilek's command here. I have a second one, even if they don't. Alright. You've got your 20/20. And a Disruptor Flute. I'll respond. Exile target creature. And spawn? Second mode's harder. It's not the bottom one. I'll take the card. Alright. Goodbye, 20/20. Gonna deal a little bit of damage to my opponent here. Gonna say no. I think there's just more impactful things that I can draw. Sowing Mycospawn. Understood. The Sowing Mycospawn now costs what, 7? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Thanks for the Yavimaya. Now I don't get to kick it here. Wait, can I Kozilek's command as well? Does that work? Cast this for... We need to leave like Cavern up. Cast this for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana, making 3 things. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can. I could also just wait a turn on it. Yeah, let's just wait a turn on it. I'll make my spawn. Get Wasteland. Wasteland the Saga. That comes into play. Pass turn. I think the Kozilek's command is just so good that I don't need to just burn it immediately on this weak-ish death-touching body. Ooh. Sure. You gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. Alright, so... Without thinking about it too much, this. Spawn. Do I want to exile? I just don't like super care about this. I don't know, I guess it prevents an attack for 3 this turn. Alright. We'll take out the mutated cultist. So this is 5 right now. This is 6 right now. I think I'm going to leave up 1 colored mana. Okay, my opponent is done with me. Karakas, great. Disruptor Flute, playable. Dismember, playable. All is Dust, probably not playable. Vexing Bauble, probably not playable. This is 1, probably 2, 3, 4, and then we decide whether or not Dismember is better than, say, Ulamog. Ulamog could be playable this time. Like, there are timelines where Urza Saga locks me down in combat steps and the game does grind to a halt. I could board out 1 land since I'm boarding in Karakas and then just do this. I don't know. My lands seem good. Let's just cut it. Let's just cut it. This is a weird one. So I have 2 answers to a 2020 that my opponent makes at sorcery speed in hand. I have selection for a reasonable turn 2 play. These are fine as turn 3 plays, probably, but this does not objectively look that strong. I think it's a keep, but like sometimes we do some awkward draw go nonsense for a little while. My opponent plays an Urza Saga out early. I get to just like turn 2 Wayscape Battle Mage with Kicker, and that's real hot. Once upon a time, sure. That was so fast. Oh, my opponent has Sowing Mycospawns of their own. Sure. Let's Devourer of Destiny. No, I don't need mana. Womp, womp. Let's just not get Wastelanded here. I'm gonna drag that guy over to the left. Not an Urza Saga. It is into the north. Sure. You've got it. Glaring Fleshraker is cool. Could get rid of the Vexing Bauble. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to play this and immediately make a spawn. I think that is just worth the card there. I want to have a little extra mana just in case. Ooh, shit. This is the sort of just in case scenario, although I do need a 4th mana to kick this. So the Nightmare scenario, okay, it's not the Nightmare scenario, but it sure ain't it ain't great. It ain't great is what I'm getting at. Tabernacle. Gross. That's incredibly awkward for me. I think I'm gonna tap Ancient Tomb to keep both of these for this turn. Immediately punished for not just paying for this with this. Cavern on Eldrazi. Pass turn. Oh, this is awkward. I think I've lost this one. Oh, there's more. Oh, sure. That's fine. My opponent will pay for that. I'm going to end up losing probably Ancient Tomb here. Ooh. That's going to beat my Wastegate Battle Mage if my opponent waits. Which they should do to play around Wastegate Battle Mage. So I will sack this time, not paying the one. What are we doing? Hold on. No, I'm not. What happened? Okay, that was weird. I think that's the same bug as like the daze thing. I think I lose the game for that. Now my opponent just makes this here and I can't kick Wastegate Battle Mage anymore. Okay, well my opponent didn't do that and I just die anyway. Concede. Next game. I'm just whacking Submit deck. So I have 3 different answers to a Merit Lage, and in theory enough mana to do my stuff. I think I'm going to keep this one and just use the Devourer of Destiny trigger to select for a soul land of some kind. Alrighty. Oh wow, no soul land on offer. Like, I would like to say no and hit a soul land for next turn. That's not guaranteed. I'm going to try to high roll though. I would really like to play Thought-Knot Seer on turn 2. And I think I have enough to do with my mana already that I am just playing this as a 2/2 attacker, despite the fact that it has relevant text in the matchup. An opposing Wasteland here is real bad for me. Yeah, I have had multiple like Devourer of Destinies just absolutely whiff on 4 looks at generic things. Hold that in hand, play this, pass. I'm gonna hold this for Glaring Fleshraker, despite the fact that Vexing Bauble is a thing. Sure. That's not great for me long term. Yeah. I'm not wastelanding here, it's too important for me to cast my own spells. Sure. Opponent's mana is really awkward. Oh, there's a Spirit Guide. That saves them. Sure. Yep. Disruptor Flute is interesting, but not super good. Sure. Another Sowing Mycospawn. This is really awkward, because like now my opponent knows that I'm missing land drops. So I can Disruptor Flute, name Wasteland, while this trigger is on the stack. But if I do so, my opponent just like doesn't fetch a Wasteland, and they fetch a combo piece that they can work with later. I think I'm just dead if my opponent Wastelands me though. This has been an unmitigated disaster. I hate it. Like now my opponent can get a combo piece, they can get a Tabernacle. Yeah. I just feel kind of dead. Sure. Like I am just going to lose to fair beats for 7. Okay. That's a start. So, what do you got going on over there? Well, we'll take the Mutated Cultist. Toxic Deluge and Walking Ballista are both quite good, though. This is awful. Yep. And these are, like, devoid, so my Devourer of Destinies don't actually kill them. I feel like most of the stuff that I have played against today has not been good for me. Which is like a metagame adapting, I suppose. So now this is just a giant Walking Ballista that can get lifelink as of next turn. Spawns? Yeah. Oh wait, the spawns are awkward because my opponent has Toxic Deluge. Ugh. I guess we're scrying. So exile creature, scry. Use target creature. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do this for X's 2. Leave up Dismember for this when this gets equipped. I'll lose my Wastegate Battle Mage in process. And take 2 damage. Or my opponent can 4 damage me. If they want. And they just think they're going to end up Toxic Deluging. Yeah. Sure. You've got it. Bad. I don't know that I can take that life loss right now. That's better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This casts this next turn. I might need to use the Lotus Petal on Sowing Mycospawn. I'm going to make my opponent use the 2 mana to equip the Shadow Spear first, though. Yeah. Ouchie, ouchie. Oh, wait, I could have 2 more life. Glaring Fleshraker. A good card is good. However, I know there is an incoming Toxic Deluge, which makes things worse. So, 1, 2, 1 floating, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 4 plus Wasteland. Kind of want to Wasteland the Dark Depths so that we don't get accidentally got by that. Oh, right. That's why I haven't been doing that. Okay. So, yeah. I think we're just doing this thing. So, Duders plus Scry and Draw. And we'll just max out here at 4. We're doing this as an effective Lava Axe that replaces itself. No. At 6 mana, that's still fine, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Doesn't even cost my opponent life. No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's fine. My opponent's stuff being devoid makes this awkward. I'm going to try to do better. I do not succeed at doing better. 4 damage to my opponent directly. Can my opponent pay 6 life? So I can cast Devourer of Destiny. 1 from this. And then that's 2 damage. Is my opponent to 7? They could go to 1. I think I'm just going to hold it. I think I just want to be able to answer a 20/20 if my opponent can do that. Yep. This is a cruel joke. So Devourer of Destiny, there's nothing here. Can I Wastecape Battle Mage and destroy my own artifacts? No, I cannot. Inconvenient. Ooh. Opponent says, here we go. Yep, well, answer another one. Despite the fact that I have this creature in play, I'm not actually sure who's favored here. Like, my opponent might still be favored. My creature is... Oh, they've got nothing. My opponent says, I'm afraid this combo is terrible. So we put some wins on the board, but that league I don't think was an accurate representation of how good this deck is. Alright, so let's debrief here. I think this deck's good. I think the Ulamog shouldn't be in the deck list, but, you know, I kind of kept that in. And I think we sideboarded it out in every round or close to it. I think our matchup profile was just bad today. Like, we ran into people playing multiple copies of Consign into Oblivion and Terminus out of Doomsday. We played against a lot of decks that had basic lands, and so Sowing Mycospawn did not get to just obliterate games the way that it normally does. Like, this is a card that preys on greedy mana bases, like, but if your opponents aren't playing dual lands and are just playing basics and you literally cannot wasteland anything, this card isn't that good. It is just of average power level. And Wastecape Battlemage didn't really have a good showing today. It's insane versus all those Murktide Regent Psychic Frog type things, which is like why I put it in the deck list. And then we just kind of awkwardly dirtled around with it in a lot of games. I definitely missed not having Eldrazi Linebreaker in the deck to have some more things that helped out in the early game. If I was going to run this back again while keeping it, you know, kind of close to mono green as it is right now, I might play 2 more of these, put the 4th one of these guys in the sideboard. I do not believe I ever boarded in Null Elemental Blast in the entire league. Those should probably go. Maybe 1 more Dismember. The mana base originally had some copies of Boseiju. I thought those were a bit greedy. They're hard to activate. Maybe you want a couple of things other than just Wastecape Battlemage that can answer artifacts. Wastecape Battlemage might just be enough, like between that and Devourer of Destiny. But generally speaking, I don't feel like we got off the ground and started to just do our thing in a lot of the matchups today. And a huge portion of that was just like Sowing Mycospawn not doing its thing. I also think I never got to kick a Sowing Mycospawn all day, which is weird. You can also change the deck by removing the Vexing Baubles if you want. They were fine to reasonable today specifically. It's a little hard to tell how good it is at any given time. I think I would be down with continuing to test this, though. Yeah, so I think that's all I have to say here, folks. I hope you all have a wonderful day. If you need some cards, consider checking out TOA and using promo code ThrabenU to save a little bit on your order. All right, I'm going to go play some board games with friends. See ya.